about a service?
Well, absolutely. You know, service is marketing, right? We spent a lot of time in product talking about most products are service products. So that actually makes more sense in a way, right? There's more of those. So absolutely. Well, thank you for asking. And really, guys, please reach out anytime. I'm happy to go over it with you. If you want to do a video conference, we can. If it's by phone, email, whatever works for you guys. I just want to make sure you're all working on something to help you. And please remember, don't do extra work. You don't need to do a marketing plan. That's a separate opportunity for a final project if you didn't want to do a research paper. And I would only suggest that for people who are seriously going that route, already have done some work on it, have it in mind, and just want to understand how to better do a marketing plan. If you want to learn more about it, just please reach out to me if you're just curious about it. And whether it's during the class or after the class ends, you can always reach out to me and we can discuss it. If you feel, 2 months from now, hey, I've got an idea, please, anytime. Happy to speak with you, okay? All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to minimize our people screen here and start up coming back to pricing. We're going to finish that chapter and then we're going to get into place and distribution. Next week, if we don't finish distribution, we'll finish that and then we'll begin on promotion. And that's the last piece we're going to be talking about. We may extend that to the last week, but we're just getting through these 4 Ps and more in depth. Remember, start of the semester, we did the overview, and then everything else has been kind of coming down in a way and getting deeper. So we're going to dig a little deeper into pricing today. A couple things that we didn't get to last week. We got through a lot, especially considering the amount of time we had. So that was great. And again, if you have any questions along the way, I will be able to see the comments when I'm not in the screen. So please do write the comments. If we're in the screen where we see all the pictures, please just raise your hand, okay? Minimize now. Yeah, there we go. Oh, hey, where'd you go? Yeah, sorry about that. Let's see here. Oh, okay, got it. This is where we left off last week. We started talking about how do we find out where what's called our break even happens, where our total cost, fixed and variable, meet revenue. So when we make enough revenue to cover our fixed and total costs, anything beyond that is profit. And then we have to figure out what is the type of profit that we want to reach. And then we do what's called a cost plus analysis. How many more do we need to sell based on what our prices look like they're going to be to get there? And remember, with the variable costs versus the fixed could be your rent, salaries you pay, etc. Variable could be based on outside factors. So if you need sugar for your product, the price of sugar goes up and down, jet fuel for airplanes. But then there's also the variable cost of how much of something you're buying. And we talked about the cost per thousand or CPM. I gave the t-shirt example where if you bought 20 t-shirts, it costs you 20 bucks. If you bought 100 t-shirts, it now costs you 15. And if I buy 1,000, I get it at 12. So if we look at that and we say our costs go down because we're buying more and more of stuff that we need to make our product, then we factor that in and we look at now what would our profits be and what will our costs be. Okay? So, sorry, excuse me here. Okay. All right, so I'm sorry, Jesse, I see you had a question about does promotional pricing go away? Yes, it does. We're going to get to that in a few more slides or a little bit later in. And if I don't explain it well enough, please come back and we'll go back over it to make sure you understand. Yeah, but the whole idea of promotional pricing is that it's for short term and it motivates buyers. And I'm going to give you an example of how I got suckered in last week during Amazon Prime Day. So hopefully that will fully explain it. So thank you. Great question. So the third one, like I said, we did value-based, which is on the perceived value of the customer. We did cost-based, which is let's look at our total cost and then just kind of figure out on top of that what profits we need. And then competition based on competitors, and we look and see how we fit within there. And again, of course, we've got to look at what our total costs are and what a perceived value of a customer is, even if we use competition based. So we use those, but the difference here is that our main focus is that we've got to stay within the competitor's area, give or take a little bit. Okay. And this is a great example, and I really like this one about how small business can survive and when service is strong enough. That's the differentiator here. If you've got a little bookstore, some people will pay more to buy a book in this little bookstore because the people in there are knowledgeable. There might be a great space for kids in there. Whatever it might be, it's that added service differentiator can allow you to charge more because people understand, look, you can't get books for the same price that a Barnes & Noble or an Amazon can. And to keep you in business, we love being able to come to this store. We love shopping here. As an example, I spoke to my hardware store today, local hardware store, and I'm working on a project. And the guys were great, and I talked to them on the phone, and they gave me a couple of really good people that could help me along with it. And this is just in the middle of the day, right out of nowhere. So I would much rather speak to them. If I tried doing that with Home Depot or Lowe's, they'd be like, hey, you know, why don't you come in? We'll talk to you later. These people really kind of know me. I've been in and out with the products and help with different kinds of projects all the time. So it's a way to look at it and say the answer, again, is not always lowering the price, and you don't always have to be fearful of charging a bit more. Sometimes you do. There's no doubt sometimes you do, but sometimes you don't. And if you're not sure about that, go downstairs in Maggie's Kitchen and see what they charge for a Gatorade versus anywhere else. If you don't know Mag's Kitchen, that's in Founders Hall, and things cost more there. Okay. Here I'm gonna slip through a couple that aren't really that. And some companies will purposely position their product as a higher price and to excite their customer base. So in other words, even if they could charge less, they likely won't sell more because the group that they're going after wants to spend more. Here they give an example of some type of jewelry or a really high-end bicycle, the Titus company. Okay, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this other to say that I think you all know what a monopoly is, right? So when we look at monopolistic pricing, or they use the other terms, what we're basically saying is, look, if we're the only ones producing this stuff, we have you. And that's, you know, that's the whole reason, or a major part of the reason there were so many laws put in place in the US to curb this stuff. Recently, you might have seen, you know, Time Warner is looking to purchase a lot of different entertainment. Disney is buying a lot of Fox's entertainment. And the fear is that it comes back to the late 1800s, early 1900s, where you had 3 or 4 what they call robber barons who controlled pricing and controlled basically what you pay workers. Because think if there was only one big accounting firm in the US. If you got nowhere else to go, they're paying you what they're going to pay you, and that's it. For my sports students, I always give them the example of what's called a reserve clause in baseball. And up until 1975, there was this reserve clause where if you drafted a player, you, the team, had the rights to this player, and they couldn't go anywhere else. There was no free agency. There was no arbitration. So the player really didn't have any say. There's no other league to go to. There's no other place to play. So until this was done, even if you were a great player, and they actually did this to Mickey Mantle, one of the all-time greats, the year prior, he was the winner of the Triple Crown. The next year, he had a really good year, but it wasn't as good as a Triple Crown, and the general manager tried to lower his salary. So imagine that today, right? Some may say the pendulum swung too much the other way now, and you know the average player, the least a player is making is $500,000 a year. But that's, you know, that's up there for debate. But when we look at pricing, so you look at the U.S. Post Office, you look at the MTA, right? What they charge you for a subway ticket, you have no choice, right? That's it. Whatever they charge you, I can't. There's no real alternative. You could say, well, I could take a cab or an Uber, but that's not a real alternative. The same with the post office. When you buy stamps, they cost what they cost, right? So that's an example of monopolistic pricing. And so just, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I just wanted to let you know what it was. And, you know, that the more we go into a full-on capitalist society, pricing can vary quite a bit, and you have to kind of pick where you fit in as a company. And this is just, you don't need to follow the formula here, but this is just, they're looking at supply and demand over time. So how much does it change here? They say quantity demanded per period. In traditional business, there's 4 business quarters. So here they're saying Q1 or Q2. So that might have been January through March, and then April through June. And then the price went from A to B. Okay, so it might have gone up in price in the second quarter for many different reasons. And when we talk about supply and demand, most likely it's because there's lower supply. So let's say in quarter 1, the avocado harvest was great, so the price was lower. Quarter 2, not as many avocados and more people want them. Well, now the price is going to go up. And that's just basic, simple supply and demand. Okay. Now this I want to spend a little time on. This is called the elasticity of demand. And this, to me, is one of the more important parts of pricing. Has anyone ever heard this term before or gone through this? Okay, so let's assume that you haven't. When we look at elasticity, just think like a rubber band. Elasticity of demand measures when you change a price, what happens to the number of customers. If you change a price and you have relatively the same amount of customers, that's inelastic. There hasn't been a change. If you change the price and you get a great level higher of customers, in other words, many more customers, that's elastic, but so is getting many fewer customers. Both are elastic. So let's take as a product the Samsung phone. And right now I'm charging $400 for the phone. Okay, and I've got, let's just say 1 million customers just to make it easy. I know there's a lot more, but let's just say 1 million customers to make it easy. And I decide, well, you know what? I think I could charge $450 and get basically the same amount of customers. So we raise the price $50 and we see, you know what? We lost 2 or 3 customers, but we're really close to where we were. So that would be inelastic. Now, let's say we lower the prices. Hey, you know what? Apple's doing really well. I wonder if we lower price, if we'll get more customers. So let's lower it $50. So they lower $50 and they're still at that million. Well, now it's inelastic. And now this could be a real problem for Samsung. And why do you think that is? Because what have you done by telling customers, hey, here's $50 less for the same phone? Sets it in their head. So you have to be really careful when you manipulate these prices. Now, if you lower it that $50 and hey, you double the amount of customers, and that's a really smart move because the profits will still be massive. So you have to look at it. What's really key here too are your margins. Besides what brand perception is, what are the margins? In other words, what's the difference between what it costs me to make and what I'm charging for it, right? And the amount of profits I want to reach. So when we look at elasticity of demand, we measure what happens to a change in the number of customers based on change in price. Those are the only 2 pieces that go along there. And in one of the next slides, it really made me laugh because it's kind of funny, but it's also kind of sad. ConAgra makes $1 frozen dinners, right? And they wanted to raise prices because they couldn't, costs went up for them, right? So they just wanted to add that cost to the customer, to the consumer. And they tried charging more than $1 for a frozen dinner. Like, I don't know about you, but if I see a frozen dinner for $1, I'm a little nervous. I mean, I guess it's possible to do. And, you know, maybe in another part of the world, maybe easier. But here, if I see $1, the chances of me eating it, unless I was 17 and it was a dare, very unlikely. Back then, I would eat anything. Now, not so much. But the $1 now, here's the weird part. They tried raising prices, and it was elastic. The amount of customers started going way down. Not down, but way down. This is I want $1. Now, that's part of also psychological pricing. That comes in. So they're in a conundrum now. because they can't charge more than $1 or they're going to lose a bunch of customers, and they can't produce the product for $1. Does anybody have an idea of what they did? And it worked. They found a solution.
They reduced the size of the meals.
Nice. Who answered that?
Talia.
Hey, good job. You know, and you might say, well, okay, that worked for Conagra, but you know, it does that all the time. Cereal, coffee. Take a look next time you're in the grocery store and you see king size cereal, which 3 years ago was large, which 5 years ago was probably medium, and how they go on down. Coffee used to have a 16-ounce can. It's now a 12-ounce can for the same amount of price because people don't want to pay more. So, and chips, look how much air there is in a bag of chips, right? They're not doing, as long as they're being honest about what's in there. Now, some of them kind of cheat because they use exact same size bag, right? But there's like 3/4 of the stuff, which is a little chintzy, but our own fault. Because if you look at it realistically, everyone's prices have gone up on things in 10 years. So the idea that you think you'd have to pay the exact same money for chips that you did 10 years ago seems unreasonable. But we're unreasonable about certain things. We just won't accept it. I got furious at a guy in Central Park who was selling me Gatorade for $4. I'm like, are you out of your mind? And he goes, oh, no, special price for you, $2. I'm like, okay. So the guy, you know, he's obviously after tourists. He's in front of Central Park. But, you know, there are certain prices that make you crazy. And sometimes it's really not that you can't afford it. It's just you're just offended by the price. So this happens with customers, and you just have to be aware of that and just kind of do your best when you can to figure out something. So all different things occur. And in the case of chips and coffee and with Conagra, it was about sizing. So really good on the answer there. Usually people don't get that right away. The economy obviously will have an effect on many products and services based on price, and you just have to figure out what can you do about that. And they're not easy answers. They're really not. If you're a spa, you're one of the first things to go. So, you know, you might want to discount somewhat, but if you do it too much, then that affects the brand. But if the economy is going really well, then you can start adding, you know, different kinds of things to the spa, enhanced services, etc., and charge more. So it's just something that you need to be aware of and do your best to work with. And they're not always easy answers. I'm not going to pretend that it is, but it's just something that's real, a reality, and you deal with it. Okay. Home Depot, the idea of more saving, more doing, really good, works really well. Puts in the people's heads that, yeah, I'm spending some money here, but I'm saving so much by doing it myself. And I can do it, and they'll help. Okay, so there are two things I want to get into now, and these are for new products. All right, so a product or a company is new, and we're going to look at what's called market skimming and market penetration pricing. Skimming is starting high, going down over time, and penetration pricing is starting at a low fixed point, but really, really important here is letting the customer know right away, hey, this price is only here for a certain amount of time, and then it's going to go up. So it's almost like promotional pricing. And I'm sorry, I forgot who asked that. It might have been Katerina. Were you the one asking about it, about promotional pricing? Or maybe that was Natalia, I forget. But it kind of... Yeah.
Probably Natalia.
Oh, Carolina? Okay, thank you. So it's really kind of connected to promotional pricing. Oh, it wasn't you. Okay, well, mystery student who asked about promotional pricing, who I'm sorry, I forget. Oh, thank you, Jesse. It was you. Okay, so Jesse, we'll come back to this promotional pricing. Thank you. And, you know, see how this connects within penetration pricing. Okay, not with skimming. It does with penetration. So skimming, we start high and we come down over time, and a lot of it will make sense when we talk about the type of products we're looking at. A great example are flat screen TVs, right? If we looked at a flat screen TV 15 years ago, a TV you might buy today for $500 might have been $10,000 15 years ago. And why? Not many people were buying these size TVs, and they were very expensive to produce. But over time, more people wanted them, and the cost for production goes way, way down over time. Same with computers, phones, etc., where new technologies are expensive, right? To put them together, to get them going. And if you don't need a lot of them, you're going to charge a lot more for them. So that over time will come down. As crazy as it sounds, travel to space is starting to go through that now. There is the availability for civilians to go into space. Tesla's working on SpaceX, but Virgin Air created Virgin Space. I don't know if you know Richard Branson, one of the all-time great entrepreneurs, has Virgin Mobile and Virgin Air and Virgin Space, had Virgin Books and many other things. And they're trying to create a way to go to space and come back as a travel plan. And as weird as it sounds now, you know, when you see $1 million price tag, you're probably not shocked, right? Because you think of, well, what would go into going into space? It costs a lot of money. Over time, though, if enough people want to go, they're going to be able to build these rockets. Once they get them together, they're still pretty far away from it. There's still hits and misses with Tesla, with SpaceX rather, with Elon Musk. But once they get that together and can kind of homogenize how we get people to space, you know, you might decide, do I want to go to Florida or the moon this year? And the price is going to come way down as many more there and how they fit on it. So both are examples of market skimming, right? And it's almost a necessity because you can't survive as a company selling it for what the price is going to be. So that's where you'll see skimming pricing, okay? It comes down over time, cost to produce goes down, number of people who want it goes up. Penetration pricing is much different. You've probably all been exposed to it. If you had a new deli in town, they might say, come in to our grand opening and get free soda and chips with the sub this week, or half off, or whatever it is to get you in there, right? And all they want to do is bring you in. And you know when you're getting this great deal that it's not going to last, they're telling you that. And that's really important, because if they don't tell you that and you get this idea in your head, this is just a super cheap place that's pretty good, they're not going to keep you as a customer. So in penetration pricing, you've really got to explain it. And I'll give a bigger, broader example. That was a really tough marketing challenge that we now take for granted, which is IKEA. You know, you guys grew up with IKEA. I didn't. I saw IKEA come in here, and it was radical. I know it sounds strange, right, to call IKEA radical, but it was. The idea of building your own furniture, that was weird, man. It's like, why would I want to build my own couch? You know, that's what furniture makers do. And the price was really low. The gentleman who started IKEA just passed away this year. Was just really frugal, knew how to save like every dime. And he wanted to pass that on to customers. That's just the way he lived. And, you know, he never lived large for all the money that he made. And just felt that's the way it should be. So he created these. Now, they had a big problem coming here to the US because the traditional furniture sales like a Raymore Flanagan or O Concepts or whoever it is that you buy furniture from traditionally, they didn't do any of this stuff. So how do they let the country know about them? And then they got these really weird sounding names, right? Like Klukelmachen chairs, Mechtanecken desks, whatever the heck it is they're calling them. So their strategy, they combined the pricing of, you know, we're going to do even lower pricing as we enter your area. We're also doing, they had ball pits for kids, they had food, which they still sell at a very low price, and they still keep that price low. So that's not really promotional pricing, that's a pricing strategy that remains. Come here, eat inexpensively, and plenty of stuff to do with your kids. And any of you might have kids right now, understand what that's like when you got little ones that are driving you nuts and you're just trying to buy a couch or a chair, and you know this just puts you at ease. So they did a great job of entering and bringing people in and thinking about you as a potential reaction to other companies. So they gained a lot of market share, they gained a lot of buzz. They used pricing as part of penetration, also used promotion. Okay, so both skimming and penetration are really more geared towards new products or new companies. That's the kind of strategies that are used there, which are a little different than what we traditionally do in pricing. The product line pricing is, I'm not going to go too deep in, but it really kind of makes sense, right? So in a product line, let's take Nike as an example. If you have Nike running, Nike soccer, Nike basketball, etc., within each one of those product lines, you're going to have different levels of shoes, right? So you're going to have the elite Nike running shoe. I don't even know what it is anymore, the Air Max, whatever. And then you're going to have the less expensive option and then the least expensive option. Well, that's all different product line pricing. If you look at, when you guys figure out what mobile phone company you want to use, if you look at Verizon, they did a great job of simplifying their product line pricing last year. They did, I don't know if you remember, they did the ice cream scoops. So 1 scoop is 2 gigs of data, 2 scoops is 5, and 3 scoops is unlimited for this price, for this price, for this price. And what it allows you to do is extend your customer base, right? If you only offered one of those, then you're going to miss out on a lot of customers. And some customers don't need certain things. Like if we look at services, tax services, if you're H&R Block, they have all different kind of service levels that they charge for. So that's, in a way, a form of product line pricing as well. So if you're a company that goes into that, you have to figure out for each level what you should be charging and when you should change that, what you should add to it, etc. Okay, so that's the basis of product line pricing.
Because I got a question.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, Tyrone.
Wondering, like, if the reverse of that cannot be true to where there's some companies that don't care to have different product line pricing.
Sure.
They offer one product and this is what they
Yeah.
charge for the product.
Absolutely, and it can change over time. You might have been one that did multi-lines and decide, you know what, we're just going to be the discount one, or we're just going to be the elite one, and it may make sense over time. And that could happen, or you just never go to product line pricing. There are plenty of products and services out there that just have that one price, and that's it. You know, if you look at Sprint, I don't believe they have more than one option. I could be wrong, but I think they just have the one option, right? It's all and unlimited, and that's it. I don't know if anyone's using that, but I think that's what they have.
I think it's T-Mobile.
Tyrone, that's an interesting strategy, right?
Yeah, I was saying I think that's T-Mobile that does that. T-Mobile.
Okay, so let's say it's T-Mobile, but
Right.
same idea, right? And that could be your strategy. So excellent, right? So this is our differentiator. You don't need to spend more, right? And we're just giving you this one, and you get everything. And so that can definitely work too. So really good. But you know, for many companies and products, it really makes a lot of sense to do those different tiers because you capture a lot more customers. In the case of T-Mobile or Sprint, that may not be, but if you look at Nike, right, and not everybody needs great running shoes. I used to be a real serious runner, you know, did marathon, half marathons all the time. So for me, you know, I spent a lot of money on shoes and I wanted to. I didn't want a less expensive option. I only wanted the more one because I needed it and I felt the difference. Whether it was psychological or physical, I don't know which combination, but it just made me feel better. So I did that. But for others, right, they could care less. If you're not a serious runner, like now I've cut way back on my running, so I'm not as concerned about that. But there is that group, so why not get them? You can charge a lot more and you know, sell a lot more shoes. So it makes a lot of sense. And you saw a little bit of that with Timberland too, right? You have the different kind of product lines and what they were looking to charge. So you kind of saw it there also. Okay, the last piece I'm going to get into was, now that I remember, Jesse, we're going to get back to promotional pricing and what are called price adjustments. All these are things that we do that are temporary in their pricing, with the exception of the psychological and the geographical. Those can remain constant. They may or may not. I'm sorry, so I missed a couple of comments. Let me see if I can catch up here. Okay, so I see some company dropped prices in China, but I don't know what it was on. And here in Canada, okay.
You were talking about IKEA.
Thank you. So yeah, let's come back to that. What were you going to say? In China, they dropped prices, is what you read?
Yes, in the book, there was a little excerpt on them dropping prices extremely to keep up with competition,
And
like the Chinese market.
excellent. So that's an example of geographical pricing. sometimes you raise the price a lot in geographical pricing because to get to wherever you're going, it costs more in transportation, etc. You know, in the case of IKEA, I don't know, you know, how much margin they had there. I don't know how they were able to come down way down on their pricing, considering the people who might be competing with them might be from China, where they have all the materials there, the distribution's not as difficult, and they've already got a way in and already partnered up with the government on business. So that's really an interesting one, where IKEA makes that move and say, okay, we're going to cut way down on our margins, but we're still going to make profit and we'll get in here. It's an interesting choice, right? That's one where we look at, and Apple's done it. A lot of us who, now you guys, some of you are all around the world, and you might actually notice it, where Apple does produce much less expensive iPhones in different parts of the world. They will never do that here. There's no point, because, right, we look at elasticity of demand, and, you know, if Apple charges $300 for a phone or charges $200 for a phone, they're still going to sell the same amount of phones. So why not bang up that price, right, until we hit that price ceiling where people won't buy it? So those are, you know, some of the concerns that you look at there. When we get to psychological pricing, as hard as it may seem to believe, charging $9.99 versus $10 really works. The classic example, thanks Tyrone, I see it works for you. The classic example happened a few years ago. So the number 2 guy at Apple took over as CEO of JCPenney. And he said, I'm going to change a lot of stuff here. And his pricing choices were really interesting. One, he tried to up the quality level of goods at JCPenney. And people really liked what they had there. And not that it was bad quality at JCPenney at all, but he just tried to make it more Apple-like and a little bit, you know, took them out of their positioning, which really, that hurt them really badly. And another move he made was directly with psychological pricing. He said, no more $9.98 or $9.99 or special sales or promotional pricing. Just this is the price and it's $10. And customers went way down. So there again, we look at the elasticity of demand. That 1 penny change in price, along with these other factors, led to way down in sales. They got rid of him, and they hired back the old guy from JCPenney to come and resurrect it. And he's done a reasonably good job considering all the, actually a very good job considering all the difficulties that brick and mortar stores, right, physical storefronts have to deal with. So kind of interesting there. Now getting more specific to what you were talking about with promotional pricing, those are those discounts you offer, a coupon coming in, a half off, you might offer a rebate. All those are different things that can work, but they're not going to be the long-term strategy. They're really good for certain amounts of time. So like at a ski lift, the heavy ski season, obviously you're going to charge the highest price, but before and after, you're going to charge a different price to get a bunch of people in. So that, in a sense, is promotional pricing. That's also part of what they call smoothing. And often at these ski lifts, you may see in the summer, they may have kind of an action sports mountain for people, or we'll do biking and other things, a way to just keep them coming in, and typically at a lower price. So that also can play to promotional pricing. Cashback and other forms of rebate are used all the time to get people to come in and buy. So I'm going to show you the promotional pricing right now that suckered me in. Well, I can't actually show it to you, but I'm going to tell you it. Anybody buy anything during Amazon Prime Week? Oh boy. Okay, so it didn't get you at all. So I teach this stuff and I got totally suckered in, right? So I warned my undergrads. I said, be careful about Amazon Prime Week because they sell a lot of stuff that you don't really need, you didn't really want, but you see the price and you go nuts and you buy it. For me, it was something I did want. I don't know, need is a little separate, but the price was incredible. And, last year at this time, I remember I was looking at Amazon Prime and talking to students about it. And I said, you know what? It's great, but I bet the price will be back down around that low pretty soon, so I don't need to buy it now. I was wrong. It never went down that low again. So this year, when I saw a really low price on a product, I bought it. And so now I have the product I've been talking to you guys about, and mentioning in products and other places. I now have an iRobot Roomba vacuum cleaner. Very exciting stuff, and I saved, according to that, a bunch of money. But for me, it was one of those where I kind of did go through the process knowing I kind of think I want it. I'd like to be lazier and not vacuum all the time. And hey, so far it kind of works. So it did work for me. I didn't buy something that I had that complete cognitive dissonance after I bought it and said, oh no. I felt kind of good because that past experience went. But I never would have bought the product if it weren't for this immediate price drop that had a limited time span. So that to me is a perfect example where promotional pricing worked. They really explained it well, said, look, this is it. Buy it now or you're not getting that price. And so I bought it and really worked for me. So I'm gonna call you guys about 3 a.m. in about 6 months and let you know how it's going from there. I will move on now. But that's really it, guys. For international pricing, we could spend part of an entire class on. I teach international marketing and I talk about pricing within there. Just understand that if you were going to go to another country, all the other potential issues, tariffs, you're probably really aware of now because it's in the news and with the president and all the changes in tariffs. But that's only one part of things. There's also the cost to move the goods. When it's there, getting the distribution to the different storefronts or online venues that you want to sell it through. There are many hurdles, cultural hurdles, all kinds of stuff that can get in the way of you selling, and you have to think about the right price for there, like you had mentioned with IKEA. I mean, that's a real kind of drastic step there, and you have to be really cautious about. And I'm real curious to see which products they included and didn't that they could get away with at that pricing. Because some products I just can't believe they could lower the price on that much more and make a profit considering all these other options. Very interesting. Okay. Okay, so I'm not going to answer about whether a phone is locked or unlocked. And again, just to finish up, these are some of the different price adjustment strategies: discounts, a trade-in, an allowance for it, and that's where we'll end here. So I'm going to now switch, and unless anybody has any other questions, and I don't see any specific here. Okay, yeah, and there's a good reason for that, right? Because Jesse was asking about if they come here and find certain products inexpensive. Well, yeah, they might be compared to because the cost of getting the goods somewhere else. It could be more expensive, potentially, depending on what it is as well. It's a product. I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's the opposite, like for instance, how when I was in Europe, the first time I was like, why? Like seriously, everybody like the crappiest car was like a Mercedes, a BMW, like, and like it didn't hit me first, and how that would work. One thing that I noticed that people do find like cheaper when they come here is like the dollar store.
I'm sorry, you're coming in and out, Carolina. Can you say that last part?
The dollar stores.
Uh-huh.
Like or the discount stores or the outlet stores, because that, for instance, in Dominican Republic we don't usually have that. It's either like you have the regular store and that's it. Like if you buy something like on the flea market, you know for sure it's gonna be bad.
Okay. Okay. So when you come here and you see a 99-cent store, you kind of feel okay with what you're getting. It may not be top quality, but it's decent quality.
Well, actually, I went crazy with the 99-cent store.
So, it's interesting. They're different products, right? And a lot of times you talk about like jeans. For years, people who came to visit the U.S. would stock up on jeans because when they sold them back in their home country, they made a lot of money off of it. I know a lady who early on with eBay made a fortune in China selling jeans overseas. A fortune. She made over $100,000 a year just selling jeans to China, working part-time on eBay. Because the market worked there. And even with the cost of shipping, her profits were that big. And that's why if you look at, oh gosh, I'm forgetting the name of it, but it's basically a series of stores that are discounted, but high-end stuff. Woodbury Commons. So if you go to Woodbury Commons, I don't know if any of you have been there, they have literally buses from Port Authority every day coming up because tourists who come to the city love to go there and shop. So they'll get stuff from, let's just say as an example, Lord & Taylor, Vuitton, Chanel, and others. And they might have been model materials that were popular a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and many of them don't care. It's just, they get the quality brand. And in the case of Asia, much of Asia are very brand centric. So a strong brand means a lot there, and they're willing to spend money for it. And it's a great business for Woodbury Commons. And without tourists, they wouldn't do nearly as well. Yes, there are plenty of Americans who shop there, but the tourism really kind of drives it there. And if you go there any day, you'll just see that just by watching. So it's really interesting there. And for some Americans, they go and say, the pricing's not that great. It's okay, and it's old stuff. And sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. So it's very different depending on who it is. So what I want to do now, guys, I want to kind of shift now. And unless you have any more questions on pricing, we're going to get to the next P, place or distribution. And really, it's a very straightforward chapter, probably one of the most straightforward. And I'm just going to tell you ahead of time, these are the main areas we're going to cover. We're going to look at the channels of distribution, both upstream and downstream. We're going to look at channel intermediaries. We're going to look at how these intermediaries can create what's called a value network. And then we're going to look at logistics and what's called third-party logistics. And that's really what we're going to be going through. Those are really the main areas that I want you to understand with distribution or place. And so when we look at distribution, just for those of you who may not have gone through this before, we look at not just how do we get our stuff to the final end consumer, but how do we get our stuff made? Where do we get it stored? How do we move all of these different parts to get to us and then out to the consumer? So there's a lot of different pieces involved here. So distributions can be very complex. It doesn't have to be, if you're Netflix, that's probably the simplest one. You open up the network, people go in, they download what they want. Very straightforward. In this case, there's no intermediaries. It's what's called a direct channel, and it's just company to consumer. If you go to the deli, you can get both an indirect and a direct product the same day. The sandwich would be direct. They're making you the sandwich. The soda you buy, the Coca-Cola, that's indirect. Coca-Cola is selling it to them. They're selling it to you. And, in many of these cases, when we look through distribution, most companies are paying for these items. So they've got to figure out how many should we buy so that we have enough for the amount of customers who want it, and that we don't order too little so that doesn't bring there, or too much that we have too much stuff left back on our shelves. And so it's a really fine line. If we look at supermarkets, probably the most challenging of all distribution, because the stuff is, many of the things are perishable, right? They have a short shelf life. So if I get too many bananas or too much milk, after a certain amount of time, I've lost all of that money. And the margins on most items in the grocery store are tiny. We're talking about like a 1 penny, 2 penny, 3 penny margin. Most items are in the 2 to 3% margins. In other words, the cost for us to buy it, what we're charging the customer is very low, and we make it up in volume because we sell so many eggs or so much milk. And then there's also the idea that by getting them in here to buy the milk or to buy the eggs, they'll buy a bunch of stuff they didn't think they were going to buy where the margins are bigger, like cookies and cereal, etc. So this is all part of it. But you think about a supermarket who has, on average, I believe, 70,000 products in their store. So in a mega supermarket, you could see 70,000 products. Imagine thinking about 70,000 products that have to all come in, eventually all have to go out. So now you kind of see the idea of the complexity of distribution and how do we make all this work, okay? All right. I just explained the concepts here. Enterprise used a great add-on to their distribution system, and really simple in a way, but brilliant. The idea that we'll pick you up. It's made a huge difference for them. They did a couple of things with their distribution. Yes, they did the We'll Pick You Up campaign, which I'll come into. And also, they started to get more spaces near airports or in airports where people need cars. Between those two moves, it made them the #1 rental car company in the US, which is really interesting when you consider how long Hertz and Avis have been fighting one or two for decades. And Enterprise comes and beats them. So we'll pick you up if you don't know. If you rent a car from Enterprise, they will send someone over to your home and bring you to their offices to get the car. And then when you're done and you drop it off, they'll actually drive you home. And I know for me, when I had little girls, this was a lifesaver. You know, it was impossible for us to get all this stuff together. And then, yeah, we could walk, but our girls couldn't walk for a mile to go get the car or wait on a bus and all these different things. So Enterprise for us was this incredible opportunity. And for a lot of people, they just loved the convenience of it. And so it made a really big difference. So that's a little change in distribution also. And again, also where they're located and the way they did that. I believe they also purchased Zipcar. If you know, do you guys know what Zipcar is? So Zipcar, you can just drop it off, right, and pick it up in different locations. They do that with bikes as well. Kind of, you know, City Bike. It's like the same idea, but with a rental car. And so through all these changes in distribution, they became #1. So really kind of interesting idea there, and it worked great for them. And I tell my undergrads, I mean, I don't necessarily recommend it for you guys at the master's level, but for undergrads who are looking to start off, they have a great management trainee program. They're excellent at service. When I teach services marketing, I use them as an example all the time. So that combination of their service, their distribution, and their overall thought process is really good. And the management trainee really helps some kids who maybe really aren't sure what they want to do kind of get a focus. And for some, it can be a long-term career. Wouldn't recommend it necessarily for you guys at that level, maybe at a higher level, but just to be aware of, really good company that seems to have so when we look at these channels, right, we look upstream and downstream. Upstream are the companies or firms that give us what we need to make stuff. So if we're Nike, we could be going upstream to get the rubber we need for the soles or the shoelaces that we need or the leather. We don't produce our own. We need it from someone else, so we have to go upstream. Downstream, who are all the partners we're using to sell our stuff? Now, in the case of Nike, right, there's multiple channels. There are many different ways to buy Nike sneakers. Yeah, you can buy it directly from them on their online, or you can buy it in the Nike stores, but they're in Athlete's Foot, Foot Locker, Dick's Sporting Goods, you know, in thousands of different storefronts. But they made a really big change this year. This year, they decided to work with Amazon. And that's pretty dramatic for them. They waited for that. And they didn't want to do that at first. Now they feel, okay, we're ready for it. We think it can work. So we'll see how Nike and Amazon kind of work together. They were also afraid for their other partners because is Amazon going to cannibalize? In other words, will Amazon do so well that our other partners that we've been using, who we sell for maybe a little bit higher price than we're giving Amazon, are they going to start losing money because so many people buy it on Amazon? So we'll see, kind of like the Walmart effect online. And it'll be interesting to see where that distribution goes. So this value delivery network, okay, it's the idea of looking at your upstream and downstream people as true partners. That's the way it should be, right? The partners need you. If I make leather for Nike, right, that's a big get for me. So I want to keep them. And if I'm Nike and I got people who make really good quality leather that I can count on for a decent price, I want to keep them. So the idea is, you know, how do we partner up, communicate well, keep this process, you know, to be cliche, a win-win, right? That both sides win here, keep this going. And that's the whole idea of this value delivery network, is that we look at things more holistically. That it's not just what can I get from you, but how do we work together? How do we help each other? And not just me and the leather company, but maybe the leather company and the trucking group that's got to bring it to me. And having open communication with all and thinking. So, for instance, if it's holiday time, the trucks are going to be pretty filled and pretty busy. So it'd be really smart to communicate with them much earlier and have them communicate with you and say, look, you know, we're going to get really busy. What do you think your needs are going into this holiday season? Now, that's a simple answer, but that's one to think of. If you find that you're,
Can I add
oh,
something?
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you what, in the case though of situation when the supplier, the distributor, or the company, one of the three parties might have a disruption that affects the other two, and not necessarily because, well, indirectly because we generally maybe between management and union or something like that.
Sure, it could be a hurricane, right? And that has happened. If you look in Puerto Rico, one of the largest manufacturers of insulin wiped out for a while. So what do you do if you're hospitals and you need it, right? Or your pharmacies and you need it? You've got to find somewhere else. So when you have, a great partner, that's fantastic, but you've got to be strategic and you got to kind of think, well, what else is out there? So just kind of being a little aware in case you do need to switch. And that's always possible. Like you said, Tyrone, a lot of things can happen. A company may raise their prices dramatically as one of your suppliers, and you no longer want to use them. So say the same leather company, all of a sudden they had a shortage for whatever reason. Well, where else can we go? So you always have to have that in the back of your head. So it's a great question that you need to know, just in case. Who am I going to go to, right? And that's with the people down. So if you look at, and this happened to a lot of companies who lost out big, who didn't think this way, when Sports Authority went out. Think about how many products got sold through Sports Authority. If you don't know what Sports Authority is, they were competing with Modell's and Dick's Sporting Goods and others, and they sold a lot of sporting goods, and they've been around a really long time. And they were very successful for a long time. And then as they got into trouble, if you think about, if I use them, and let's say I did an exclusive deal with them, boy, I'm really in trouble now in terms of selling my stuff. So the smarter companies saw this starting to happen and started making changes and started thinking, okay, well, yeah, we used to count on $3 million a year in profit from Sports Authority, but we just have to accept that's not going to be the case anymore. Others just didn't want to face it and figured, oh, they'll find their way out of it, and they got really hurt. And when they posted their quarterly earnings, a lot of them went way down because Sports Authority went out. So you're absolutely right, Tyrone. We do have to look at this. But then again, if you think about it, if you were really communicating and you had this real value network, everyone else is going to tell you within your network, hey, be careful with Sports Authority. That could be a problem for you. And maybe you'll make a better decision, just as an example. Or a company might say, look, we want to stay your supplier, but we're going to have trouble in a month. We're expecting a really bad winter, and it's going to affect a lot of our stuff. We'll be good after that, but, we have some ideas of what you could do in the meantime. And that just creates a kind of a loyalty there. So it's really, the whole idea of the value network, it's never foolproof, right? Some things you just can't control. So when we looked, if you remember, we looked at the macro environment, and those are things that affect you, and you try and be as as you can, and you try to think ahead. Sometimes you just can't, and you just deal with it. But many times you can, and that's kind of the point here. And also, when you have great suppliers, or you have great people helping to sell your stuff, keep them happy and keep it going. And that's kind of the point of this value delivery network, rather than just I give it to this person, then they get it to here, and they get it to here, and then we hope everything sells. That's, according to the text, the wrong way to look at it. That you should be looking at it holistically, communicate together, and working well together. So for Zappos, if you think about it, they're a great partner for shoe companies, right? Because they can sell a lot of shoes. Their salespeople are crazy. They will stay on the phone with you for 5.5 hours if you want. The longest call they had was 6 hours of some customer talking about shoes. Can you imagine talking to Verizon for 5.5 hours about phone service? They're like, sorry, sir, ma'am, you gotta go, right? But they're encouraged there to do that, right? So that's their kind of differentiator, part of what they do. And they were bought out by Amazon, so they're connected to Amazon. And they sell a lot of shoes for people. So they're a great channel. And you don't have to do it exclusively. Now, I mentioned Amazon. Amazon does fight for exclusivity on certain things. As a watch company. and he has the rights to all the licenses of all the major sports leagues. So football, baseball, basketball, hockey, NASCAR, college. And there's one company, Fanatics, that's kind of like an Amazon for sporting goods. And he was told in no uncertain terms by both Fanatics and Amazon, if you use one, you can't use the other. And he could sell a lot of watches with both, but now he's forced to make a choice on his distribution. That's a really difficult choice to make. He chose Fanatics, but you know he's hoping that eventually Amazon will allow him in, and Fanatics can work something out. But it's something that you have to deal with, and to him that's the better partner. It's more finite. Those are more likely where my customers are going to be. So if it has to be one or the other, I'll choose them. But if he was able to choose both, he'd do a lot better. So sometimes this exclusive stuff with distribution can get in the way too. Okay. So again, the marketing channels, I think you understand now, both upward and downward, and each of these channels have intermediaries within them. Let's see. Oh, yeah, this is good. Okay. So let's take a break from the PowerPoint for a second, because I really like this question. As somebody had asked, is it fair that Uber changes its pricing depending on the hours? Does anyone have a really strong opinion one way or the other?
I mean, it's not, is it fair? No, but people are going to, if they need a ride bad enough, they're going to pay for it. So it's almost smart on their part.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's, you know, that's the thing. So are they taking advantage of people, or are they being smart business people? Right?
I think
if you look at, I'm sorry, Tyrone, I'll get right to you. A lot of other industries do the exact same thing and people don't complain.
Right.
Hotels and airlines, all the time. Their rates could change within a day.
Right.
It's standard common practice. But Uber does it, and oh, you're the evil empire. Now, I'm not saying what side to take, but it's very interesting that we look at different products differently. But Tyrone, what were you going to say?
I was going to say I think it's fair. If you look at, like, they just didn't do it because of doing it. I think, like, if you look at, say, for example, during rush hour, a driver might get stuck in traffic or might take longer to get where you need to go, and therefore that driver might use his more.
Well, that's a separate kind of thing. We're not talking about that here. Here we're talking specifically because of the hour, and you're right, it does have to do with traffic, but because of the hour.
Yeah, but they do change the prices during the rush hours too. Like if you ever try to get a Uber during rush hour, the prices go up.
Right.
So I think that's what she's. I hope that what the question was asking.
Yeah, well, it connects to that, right? So if they can do fewer rides because they're more stuck in traffic, should they pass that cost along to the consumer? Or even if they can do more rides and they can make more money.
But like I had a thing that the app was like freezing out and it was like it's not connecting and blah blah blah. And when it finally connected, it was like it changed the time, so the ride was like double. And I was like, hold on a second, I did not agree to this. But then,
that's borderline shady, right? Because if it kind of flips on you. Now, if you've ever taken a limousine or a sedan, they also charge for different areas that they go through. So they'll have defined map areas, and you, if you're going in a certain direction, you might pass 3 zones and get 3 added zone pricing. And you know, we talk about international pricing, they do the same thing. When you're shipping goods over zones, you can get charged for each one of those zones as well. So you have to pass that along to the customer to make your profits. So it's something there too. But thanks for bringing that up. That's a cool question. And it's one, you know, I'm not going to say what the right answer is. I was just saying if you can do it and you keep the same number of customers, right? We don't see that elasticity of demand and we're raising prices and we're getting, you know, the same number of customers, that could work. If we do have a big backlash and it doesn't work, then they have to think about it. But it might be worth trying and then saying you're sorry, right? Okay. I'm not going to break this down too much, but this is just to show the multi-channel approach. In other words, you may have several manufacturers who make the stuff that get to the customer. and you might have distributors, you might have all different types of groupings to help you sell. But I do want to get into some of the different ways that different channel members add value. One of the best, to me, as an example, is like the relationship between Apple Computers and Best Buy. Because Best Buy is a fantastic added value for you, right? They're promoting your product every day. You'll see TV commercials, internet ads, all that stuff. Best Buy is paying for, and they're saying, come down and buy an Apple product now. That doesn't cost Apple anything. That's a wonderful partner to have. They also have usually very good service. They have people who are pretty knowledgeable about the products that can help sell. It might be the reason somebody buys an Apple versus an HP versus a Samsung, because you're there and answering their questions and you're doing a good job. You know, people want to be confident in their purchase. This helps alleviate the fear. And Best Buy does a great job with all of these pieces, so they're a really good added value. But added value doesn't have to be just Best Buy. There's a video I show my undergrads, and unfortunately I couldn't upload it for you. I'll try and find another way to get it to you, but about this small winery called Creston Vineyards. And they have this husband and wife team that are sales brokers. So they represent a bunch of different wines and they help sell them. But what they can do for Creston Vineyards is they can get them into doors they'd never get into, because they have so many strong relationships with so many different wine distributors throughout that region. So Chicago, Wisconsin, Minnesota, in that area. For them, it's not that hard. They'll call up Sally or Joe or Frank and say, hey, I want to try and sell this wine with you here, and here's why. And for you, as Creston Vineyards, it might be really hard to get in that door. So they can get you into certain doors. They're adding tremendous value there. My friend who has a watch company, he does a combination of inside and outside salespeople. The inside salespeople work certain areas and they're really good at what they do. But the outside salespeople have, again, developed relationships with the Dick's Sporting Goods, with these other places where they can at least get the meeting, where his company on its own may not. Well, who are you? But, oh, I know Joe I've been dealing with for 10 years. So that can be a real added value. And it could be a major difference. And even if it costs a little more to hire these people, if you're getting that much more in sales, it might be worth doing. So added value adds itself in a lot of different ways. It could be suppliers who can make things that are really good, on time, less expensive. That's a great added value. So again, when we look at this value delivery network, it's what's the added value of each, what's called intermediary, each person who helps you along the way in either making your stuff or selling your stuff, and what is their added value. So if you see all these different strings of added value, you can see how your company does well. And that's kind of the whole point to what Kotler is trying to express in this value network. Okay, so again, it could be contacts, experience, specialization, scale of operations, and when we get to logistics, we're really going to talk about that. Okay? I'm not going to actually do this. And again, this is the idea of multiple channels and all the ways you can go through. Here's one that's direct. Here's one that's direct. All these others are indirect, getting to the customer. I do like to talk about this. Sometimes there's what's called channel conflict, and you saw that PowerPoint on Goodyear tires. Well, as a Goodyear tire distributor, so they don't make the tires, they just were like a franchise for Goodyear. And the reason I like talking about it is because it used to exist right near the school. If you made a left when you went out of the school and you continued on Riverdale Avenue for about 3 or 4 blocks, there was a Goodyear distributor. And they were there for a really long time, but they went out of business. The main reason they went out of business is because Costco and Walmart started selling tires. So a lot of people started buying tires there instead of the tire distributor. And you know what I always ask my undergrads, and I'd like to ask you guys too, is, and there is an answer, what could they have done to stay in business? They lost, they're out, and now there's a used car lot there. But what could they have done, the Goodyear distributor, knowing Walmart's there, knowing that Costco is there, to save their business?
Could they have diversified, Professor, and improved customer service?
Well, your second part's right on. Your second part is right on. Diversify would be interesting. I don't know exactly how they do it, but it's the level of service, right? Really, their only chance of survival, if you remember, I was just talking about that Annie's bookstore, that little bookstore that could compete with the big boys. The only chance now is just give incredible service. And you might also want to add to your augmented product. So in other words, will you give more of a guarantee of service? When we finish, how long will we guarantee it for? Well, let's do it for 2 more years than, say, Walmart or Costco, right? We'll guarantee these tires longer. Even if it costs us a couple bucks for the few people who do come in, maybe we keep the customers. And reaching out to them and just telling them, say, hey, we really want you back, to all your existing customers. It's really tough. I'm not saying it's easy, but if you're in that situation, what do? And in this case, it didn't work because now they're gone. So, and now you can get a used car there if you want. But, and again, here we're just talking about the way that systems are set up. So when the retailer, wholesaler, producer are all working together, that's a lot better than just going down the line and eventually getting it to the consumer. Here, we're assuming there's communication, they're working together. The great example is Zara, which I think let me see if I'm jumping ahead here. Yeah, I'll go back a couple slides, but Zara actually has their own factories. So they can compete at a level that their competitor just can't. Let's say for whatever reason this summer, blue miniskirts for men became really popular. Well, Zara can work with it. Hey, woke a couple people up. How about that? All right, so they can go to their factories and get them made like that. Their competitors can't. They have to reach out, try and find a factory, try and get them done. And they have the stores. Zara's in these malls all around the country. They have their distribution locked down. It's very easy for them to react. Remember when we looked at product and we looked at fashion and we saw how it can go up and down really quickly? Well, if something's going up and we know it's not going to last that long, we got to try and capture that share really quick and keep it. Zara can compete in that way because they have these controls over these various channels. So that's kind of what they're expressing there. I passed over the idea of, you looked at Dunkin' Donuts. Here, I want to just discuss that the 2 biggest coffee companies in the country, Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks, have a completely different system of management. Dunkin' Donuts decided to go through franchising, and if you're not sure what franchising is, it means you or I could purchase a store and have the rights to that Dunkin' Donuts. Starbucks owns every single store and provides management for every single store. There are no franchises of Starbucks. So, the question obviously is why? Starbucks could make more money by franchising, potentially. They could charge hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not $500,000, whatever it might be, for a given Starbucks franchise, like Dunkin' Donuts does. But they choose not to. And it's actually, for them, it seems like a very smart decision. So this is a logistics decision. So if you've ever been in Manhattan and you look for a Starbucks, you walk 6 steps and there is one, right? There could be one on 33rd and 3rd, 34th and 3rd, 35th and 3rd, and then 34th and 2nd. And think about it from the point of view from the franchisee, somebody who would have wanted to purchase a franchise. How difficult it would be to be successful. Because I've got all these other stores so close by. But for Starbucks, who owns all of them, it's still worth doing. And if it's not, and it's even too little profits, they just shut it down because they don't have to worry about the franchisee. They're not involved. You want, if you're Dunkin' Donuts, you don't want just their immediate money. You want them to be successful. Every franchise that's successful does a lot for the parent company. You buy the products from the parent company. You buy the coffee from the parent company, the donut mix, all that stuff you buy from the parent company. So every successful franchise, not only do you get their initial amount of money, you get that constant flow of money coming in every couple of weeks when they're ordering their food, etc. So you want every franchise to be successful. So Dunkin' Donuts doesn't want to just keep throwing in stores, charging a few $100,000 and watch a bunch go out of business. That does not help their model. Does it happen sometimes? Yes. Subway has gotten into that. Subway also has a problem with their pricing. Their $5 footlong isn't enough margin for the average store, and they're losing money on these $5 footlongs. So they keep telling the parent company, stop promoting this because it's not making us any money. But it's bringing in the parent companies because they're ordering the food for that. So it's a difficult kind of thing that happens in there with franchising, or can happen. But if you're Starbucks, you don't worry about any of that. You tell them this is it, this is how it's done, and there's no blowback because they're your stores. If you have a problem by having too many, you get rid of some, and that's it. So neither one is right or wrong. It's just different decisions that you choose to make. And if you ever want to run a franchise, you can be very successful. It's a lot of hard work. There is so much you have to worry about. Think about owning a McDonald's franchise and relying on the workers, right? To be there every day, to be nice, to be clean. And you're dealing with tough customers sometimes, and some, especially late at night, or a little maybe not in their right mind. And all these different things you have to deal with. But if you do it and you're successful and you can eventually hire a good manager that you trust to run that franchise, you buy another and another. And there are people who have become millionaires through franchising and building up through that. So it can be a successful venture. It's a very difficult one at first, very difficult at first. Many people struggle with it. They're not really understanding and or willing to put in the hours that it takes to be successful. So there's some pluses and minuses to it. And from a corporate level, it's just an interesting choice. Do you want to be a franchise or not? And I'll just leave it off with, believe it or not, one of the top franchises now is actually on cleaning lice. I know it sounds gross, but every year a new group of kids get lice, right? And so particularly in more affluent areas, they have these machines, and they're like these super blower machines. And I remember my girl, they were going to go, and I asked, well, how much does it cost? And she said, it's like $400, but they'll be great. Then go to the doctor. That's it. You're not going to the franchise. But there are a lot of people who want to go to this franchise and get it done because that's all they do. And right now, the franchises are doing very well. I don't know what the long-term future is, but if you look it up, and you'll see that they're in a lot of towns that you wouldn't think of. It's a pretty low-cost opportunity for being a franchisee. So you buy the machines, which are fairly expensive, but that's your main cost. You don't need that many workers. You don't need any real special trainings, and your hours can be small because you don't need to be open all hours of the day on weekdays like McDonald's does. And you can realize some pretty good profits because per customer, you do really well. So it's interesting, and just, I mean, you can look up all franchises, but always enter franchises with caution. That's all I'll say. Okay. All right, so I'm sorry, I couldn't see the comments until now because I was in the full page mode. So let me see, we'll look here. Okay, so Metro North, the peak off peak, okay. On each Dunkin' Donuts have their own promotions, so they all agree. That's a great question. So you're asking about the promotions. I know we haven't gotten there yet, but let's take a look at that. Actually, a portion of every franchisee's earnings goes into the national promotion, about 3%, at least with McDonald's. So all the commercials you see all around the country that help bring people to your store, you're paying about 2 or 3%, which is a great deal when you consider how many billions McDonald's spends on promotions. Local promotion you can do. The national promotions you don't do, they're done for you, right? So if you want to do something like you want to have a basketball fundraiser at your particular Dunkin' Donuts or McDonald's, you can do that. You don't need to check in. You can just go and do that. But you're not gonna have half off on dollar meals. It'll kind of go against the national corporate policy. That's something that you want to stay in line with for the most part. And there are exceptions. So like the Dunkin' Donuts in Riverdale, they have kosher donuts on the one down when you make it right and leave, and not on the one on the left, because the one on the left doesn't have enough Jewish people that would be concerned about it. The one on the right does. So they've actually done a lot of kosher stuff within there, and it works really well. And that's one franchise. You're not going to go kosher with Dunkin' Donuts all around the country, right? That's unnecessary. but there it really works, and they were smart enough to make it local. So great question about the promotion. So there's a mix of both. I know as a franchisee, when it's a good company, they really support you. They support you.
I gotta comment.
Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say a very good example is when you look at car commercials on TV. If it's a Nissan commercial, it's generally just a Nissan commercial. It doesn't say, Largemount Nissan or something. It's very weird that you see like a local commercial for like a car dealership. It's generally like a Toyota commercial or.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're not going to see a car dealership commercial, let's say, on a national level, right? Like you're not going to see Fred's Toyota of Central Avenue on a national commercial, but there are a mix of local and national commercials sometimes on the same show. So you might see that, right? So if you watch, like I'm a huge sports fan, I'm a big baseball fan, and in a lot of baseball games, you'll see a ton of car dealership ads. You'll see the major car ads as well. So there you might see that, but you're absolutely right. It doesn't make sense, right? If you're only on Central Avenue in Yonkers, why would you want to do a national commercial? So that wouldn't work. But yes, you'll see different kind of promotional techniques depending on how much reach you have and what you are in terms of local versus the national. So guys, let me just see if there's anything else I want to get to tonight, and if not, we'll just push it off here. Actually, let me let you guys off. We'll finish off a little bit early tonight. So next week, we'll finish distribution. I'm not going to get too much into retailing and wholesaling. I'll touch upon it, but I'm not going to go deep into. So if any of you are really interested in that, let me know, and we can have that discussion because I want to move on to promotions. So we'll look at the first chapter on promotions. I believe it's chapter 14 in your book. I'll double check and give it to you. But what I want you to really see there's one key slide that talks about the promotional mix. And you know the 4 Ps now are the marketing mix. Within the 4 Ps, promotion is one of the Ps. And within promotion, there's 5 different styles of promotion that a company can use. And so we're going to analyze that and see how all that works together. Okay? So thanks very much for tonight, guys. I look forward to reading your papers, and please, if you have any questions about the final paper proposal, talk to me before next Tuesday so that you feel comfortable with it. And please, 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 again, follow the format. There will be point reductions if you don't follow the format. It is on the module. Follow that format, not one that you like or that you think looks good. Follow that one, and if you do that work, it'll really help you towards the final paper, okay? I'm going to hang out for a little bit on here in case anybody wants to ask any questions, but thanks very much, guys, and I will see you next week if you don't. Okay, bye now.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Yes, sir. Bye.